of 35. Thank you. Okay, we're being recorded now. I'd like to introduce our sponsors for this meeting, Ahmed, and I'm going to butcher your last name, Ogunamubu, or what is it?
Oh, Gumbo me. Pretty close.
Close. And Tommy, how do you say that? Richard? No kidding. Tommy Richard.
Hey,
They're both officers with the Young Professionals Group, and we'll spend a minute and a half or 2 minutes for you all to introduce what you guys are doing. If you are a housing professional under the age of 35, pay attention. Go ahead.
Ahmed, you want to go?
Hey, sure. Yeah, I'll kick it off. So the NBOA YP is obviously the new generation of emerging real estate professionals. We have the kind of unique opportunity to be an extension of obviously the greater NBOA org. So it just lends itself to give us a little bit of a playbook when it comes to access to real estate professionals, networking opportunity. And additionally, as the emerging developers, or excuse me, emerging professionals, it gives us access to opportunities from a career development perspective. Just kind of as an industry best practice, we're kind of pretty much targeting 21 to 35-year-olds. And we generally sense that people that have really enjoyed our experiences have that entrepreneurial spirit, but also a curiosity to kind of deepen their knowledge and expertise when it comes to the path along within real estate. Tommy, he will kind of share a little bit about some of our up and coming events.
Yeah. We just got approved to tour the Skyscraper Guys Pittsfield project. That's going to be June 28th. It's a Thursday, and should be great. He'll give us a little intro about what he does, and yeah, like Ahmed was saying, it'll be a good event for like-minded young professionals to come together, and you know get to see a little bit of history in Chicago. So I'm looking forward to it. And yeah, if you have any interest in or questions on the club, I'm going to drop my contact information in the comments. So feel free to shoot me an email or a text. And yeah, really looking forward to meeting everyone.
And tell us quickly about your job board that you're starting.
Yeah, it's just going to be a job board where we post like new opportunities that pop up amongst the MBOA, any real estate, job for a incoming entry level role.
So if somebody wants to be added to your email list, do you want to put that information in the chat box?
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. Gentlemen, thanks for the sponsoring us today,
Thanks,
and we're
Myk.
really looking forward to what you guys are doing. It's so important, and great job. Okay,
Thanks so much.
with respect to our meeting today, we welcome such a large crowd. We realize that these are some seriously important issues and contentious issues in some ways. There might be folks on this call who might see things a different way, might be dramatically opposed to what we stand for. And if so, we welcome you with all the expectations of respect and learning and hearing the other side to any issues that are here. And of course, we welcome and will avail ourselves to hearing out your side as well. But today's an opportunity for three professionals to share with us the latest with respect to this proposed ordinance. I am super excited that we've got a phenomenal moderator, an active member of the NBOA, Steve Rich of 5280 RG. Steve has also recently taken on the reins of one of our affiliates, the Southside Community Investors Association. And I'm with great pleasure that I don't have to moderate. I turn it over to Steve for the ugly task. So go ahead, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you, Myk. Thanks for the introduction. Welcome, everyone. I would like to just let everyone know that the NBOA is hosting this webinar to ensure that property owners are briefed on the discussions currently happening within City Hall. The mayor's office and the Department of Housing have drafted language that would include amending the existing RLTO, the Residential Landlord and Tenant Ordinance, creating entirely new laws that would regulate rental properties throughout the city. The draft proposals include a just cause eviction, with very steep relocation assistance, new fee limitations, a mandatory registry, and a tenant bill of rights that makes some undefined rent increases unconscionable. Um, it should be clear that nothing has been officially introduced by City Council, so the proposal being discussed is coming from the mayor's office. There have been briefings with alderpersons and draft language has been floated. Until something is actually proposed, we will not know the entire set of amendments and new laws that the mayor's office proposes. Therefore, we would like to continue to stay engaged with the NBOA. We ask that you continue to stay engaged with the NBOA throughout the next several months. And our team is currently monitoring developments daily, right? So the panel before you today includes NBOA's Communication and Government Affairs team. We want to have this discussion so that you know how significant these changes could be. So your attention and participation is critical over the next several months. We've also created a petition to ensure we demonstrate opposition to City Council and the mayor's office, which will be the register for that will be given later on today. Please also know that we'll connect in person for the NBOA Summer Soiree at Artifact Events on August 6th. This is our largest fundraiser of the year. Proceeds from this event will continue to make Chicagoland a region where owners and operators of housing can thrive while ensuring that people in the communities find quality housing that they want. So with that being said, let's get down to business. On the panel today, we have Myk Snider. He is NBOA's Public Affairs and Communications Mastermind. He is responsible for getting in front of the Tribune's editorial board last week, helping us to spread the word on this issue. Also, we will have joining Myk, Joe Moore, who is a longtime government affairs expert and lobbyist. He is joined by Adriann Murawski, who recently started working with the NBOA to help with some special projects, including lobbying on this current PRO issue. How are you, everyone?
We're great.
Great.
Great to be
Fired
here.
up and ready to fight.
Yes. Thanks for your leadership on this.
Thank you for joining us. So let's talk a little bit about the process that's been happening at City Hall. Joe, could you give us a sense of what is happening this week in the Committee on Housing and Real Estate?
Well, thank you, Stephen. There has been talk about massive changes to the Chicago Landlord Tenant Ordinance for quite some time. This has been on the Landlord Tenant Ordinance has been on the books for 40 years. And the mayor wants to use this 40th anniversary to carve new tenant protections for allegedly for tenants in Chicago. And it's no coincidence, of course, that next year is an election year, and he desperately needs to gin up his progressive base, and he believes this is one means of doing so. So there's been a task force that the housing department has organized, and they've had several meetings over the course of the last several years. The composition of the task force is overwhelmingly tenant rights advocates and other advocates out of the progressive world. We did have one housing provider representative on the committee and a representative from the Chicago Land Department Association. So that was it from the housing provider side. We have not yet received a final draft of the ordinance. There have been some drafts that were floated a while ago. There's been a lot of slide decks that the mayor's folks have presented to aldermen in briefings, but despite the requests of many aldermen for an actual text of the ordinance, that has not yet been forthcoming. Originally, we were hearing reports that the mayor intended to introduce this directly into committee, into the Housing and Real Estate Committee, rather than through the normal process. And I apologize for getting a little bit on the procedural weeds, but this is kind of important. Ordinarily, when an ordinance is introduced, an ordinance is a proposal. It is introduced into the city council at one of their regular meetings and then referred to committee for deliberation, and the committee then reports back to the city council whether they recommend passage of the ordinance or they don't. There is an extraordinary measure that can be employed, usually in emergency situations when time is of the essence, when you can introduce a matter directly into committee. This is something that is not done routinely, but there's a lot of talk that they will do this with this ordinance. And why? Because the Committee on Housing and Real Estate is one of the few committees in the city council that is dominated by mayoral loyalists, people who are still mayoral allies, and they want to avoid any possibility of it being introduced and referred to the City Council Rules Committee. Historically, the Rules Committee chairman and the mayor act in concert, but now the chairman of the Rules Committee, Michelle Harris, is much more independent of this mayor than she has been with previous mayors. And so they don't view that as a guarantee that it would be able to get voted out of the Rules Committee. So they want to go direct into, this is a report, they want to go direct into the Housing Committee, have it considered by the Housing Committee, and then voted on and referred to the full City Council. Originally, we thought that might happen last Wednesday the 3rd. The committee delayed their meeting for a week, and we thought it might be happening this Wednesday. But the reports we get is that it will not be introduced this Wednesday, nor will there even be a hearing on this issue. We originally thought, well, they won't directly introduce it into committee, but they'll have for a vote, but they'll have a hearing. Now it does not look like they'll have a hearing. Just before this meeting, or as this meeting was taking place, I checked the Housing Committee agenda. It has not been placed on the agenda. They have until 12:30 today to place on the agenda for Wednesday's meeting. I don't think that's going to happen. The Department of Housing is having a briefing with those of us who are representing you, those industry folks representing you, this Wednesday around the same time the Housing Committee meeting is taking place. I said I would only agree to attend that briefing if we were sure that there would be no hearing on the ordinance itself that we're meeting on, and they assured me that wasn't the case. So we're going to have to continue to be vigilant. This thing is going to be introduced one way or the other. They are going to try to push it through, but the question of just how and when is still very much up in the air. And also up in the air is exactly the substance, the language that will be part of this ordinance. As they always say, the devil is in the details. We don't have the details yet. All we have are some earlier drafts from a couple of months ago and a lot of presentations that the mayor's office has been giving to various aldermen to try to convince them that this is a good idea, at least as they're presenting it right now. So that's basically it on the process, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Adriann Murawski, who will walk you through what we understand, what we believe is going to be part of this ordinance once it is introduced.
Thank you, Joe. Before we do that, I just want to remind everyone that we would like for this to be interactive. So if you have any questions, please introduce those into the chat, and we'll have someone that is pulling those out, and we'll get those. And then next, Adriann, since we have an idea on the process, what exactly is in the proposal? Could you give us some of the very high-level areas of concern for the industry and participants today?
Absolutely. I'm going to share my screen, so give me just a moment. I'm pulling those up right now. So, let me try that again. Here we go. Okay. All right, so I wanted to make this very high level. in terms of what is being proposed. Steve, can you see my slides, and does anything look off to you? I just want to check in to make sure we're good to go.
No, it looks like you're good. I can see.
Okay. All right. So Joe talked us through some of the procedural stuff. That's all very helpful. And so many of you are probably asking, well, what exactly is in this proposal? And so again, we haven't seen the introduced version because nothing has been introduced yet. But so far, these are the things that are being talked about at a, and today we're not going to get too far in the weeds, but I would like you to know at a very high level, there are some key topics. So one is that there are amendments to the RLTO. You all are probably deeply familiar with this existing law since it's been on the books for about 40 years. This includes different notice requirements. So you already are familiar with the Fair Notice Ordinance, but there are just some modifications to some of those notice requirements. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Disclosures. So if you are using any sort of revenue management software like RealPage, you would, if this passed, must disclose that information. The security deposit, they do include some language to a right to cure with no interest on holding the security deposit, along with a 1 month cap on what the amount would be if you do switch over from a fee to a security deposit. That would be limited according to some of the early drafts that we've seen. And then the fees would be limited. So any sort of screening fee that you may have, there would be a cap of $50 or the actual cost. Now, this begs the question of, well, there's been recent state legislation that passed. It's awaiting the governor's signature. What passed is that any fees that are charged need to be disclosed. And so we'll learn a little bit more about how this legislation might interact with the state legislation. And quite frankly, it may not be necessary if the state is forcing jurisdictions and for housing providers to disclose any fees up front before signing a lease. In addition to amendments to the existing law, there are new areas which include just cause eviction for non-renewals, relocation assistance, which is essentially a move-out fee, a rental registration, a Bureau of Rental Housing, and then an eviction counsel program. So I'm going to kind of keep walking through this, Stephen, but I wanted to check in with you first. Should I just kind of keep going through some of the slides here?
Yeah, I would do that.
Sure. And I mean, if you can, it looks like you're going to get there. It's number 2, but could you explain the just cause eviction in basic terms and why it is problematic for our tenants?
Absolutely. Yes. So just cause eviction may be a new topic to some of you. And really what that means is there needs to be a reason to not renew other than filing an eviction. So just cause eviction and relocation assistance really go hand in hand. So I want you to make that connection, even though they're in the ordinance itself, it might be separate areas, but really they're connected. So there are specific reasons that a lease ends. The first 2 on this list, so specific reasons to terminate a lease: non-payment of rent, material lease, a breach of the lease between the tenant, the agreement that they made. And if one of those 2 things happen, usually you file an eviction, which can take 6 to 8 months. You're trying to figure out how you're going to cover the expenses for that unit. Maybe you've worked with the county's legal aid for tenants. Maybe you've received some sort of an assistance, or the tenant has worked with the right to counsel program. But those are the eviction process that you're all familiar with. In a just cause eviction, this is saying that, all right, so you're not filing an eviction, but you're not going to renew it. And there are specific reasons why you might not renew a lease. So if the tenant refuses to renew, that's sort of out of your control. But if there's a relative that you would like to move into a unit that you own, There's maybe you want to convert a unit from a rental to a condominium. That's a reason to non-renew the lease. There's maybe significant repairs, or there's been a government order to vacate a unit. There's demolition. So those are some specific reasons why you might not renew a lease. Any other reason, say for example, a tenant might just they don't fit necessarily within the community. Maybe they're disruptive, but they're not necessarily violating their lease. There are other reasons why you might just say, you know what, I've had a lot of complaints from other tenants, but I'm just not going to renew the lease. Otherwise, they've paid their rent. They're in, they haven't necessarily violated something, but there's other reasons. So this is where the relocation assistance comes in, and this is where you should really pay attention. So in just cause eviction, if you're not filing an eviction case or you're not proceeding with an eviction and you want to just non-renew it, this is where it's significant in cost, and this will drastically impact the ability for many smaller owners and operate to continue to operate, because these costs will naturally be built into the rental rate. And this will change the ability for many people, and in some cases to be able to afford rents, right? Rent is already high for so many people, and this will just continue to put pressure on rents. So in the case of an owner-occupied unit where there are 6 or less, or a nonprofit, the early drafts have it being the greater amount of $3,000 or 3 months rent. So you can do the math. Whatever your rental units are renting for, the amount, take that times 3 in the scenario of an owner-occupied unit or a nonprofit. The other example is when there's a condo conversion, there's an owner or a qualified relative that's going to move in, or there's significant repairs to a unit. So that amount that's being proposed for the relocation assistance in the case of a non-renewal would be the greater of $5,000 or 5 months rent. And again, you can do the math on some of the numbers there, but that's pretty substantial, especially if there's a building that is already really tough to pencil out and the math doesn't math. This is going to make it even more challenging for people to buy and sell and to operate those units. And now this is very, very concerning, because this, in some cases, if there's any other reason than those listed on the screen, so any other reason to do a non-renewal, this is the case where a tenant may just not be the right fit in the community, but they're otherwise paying their rent on time and they're in compliance with the lease, where you're not filing an eviction, but you're just letting them know, hey, in 120 days or however long they've lived in the unit, you notify them of the non-lease renewal. That's where this amount is so significant that your engagement and your awareness is really key, because it could be the greater of $10,000 or 10 months rent. And again, whichever amount is greater, that's huge, right? So that's just cause eviction and the relocation assistance. And again, those go hand in hand together. And so, Steve, I'm going to do a check-in with you to talk about, that's just cause and the relocation assistance. And then I think you might have another question to bring in here.
I do. Thank you very much for that, Adriann. They got a couple of questions in there we'll circle back on after in the Q&A. But our next question is, can you explain the rental registration, the rental registry that's being proposed in this ordinance?
Absolutely. So I have one more slide here. So the Protect Renter Ordinance, again, has not been introduced. We keep saying that because we want to make that crystal clear in this call today. But depending on how many units are owned by an owner or an LLC or the groups that have formed to operate property is dependent upon the amount of fee that would be charged. So anyone who owns between 1 to 4 units, their cost to register with the city, which is an entirely new program that the city would be offering or requiring for property owners, for 1 to 4 units would be $20. It's estimated that there are 263,000 owners that own between 1 and 4 units. So you can see sort of like an estimate of what the revenue projections would be to the city.
And that's $20 per unit, right, Adriann?
Correct. Yes. So if I just kind of did this math for, purposes of explaining this, and everything is an estimate. And again, we won't know until something's introduced. But I just wanted to show the math because this is how the city is looking at a rental registry. And if you go through the property sizes and the amount of properties within an ownership structure, 5 to 49 units would be $40 per unit. And there's an estimate of there being 195,000 units, which would generate $7.8 million for the city. Similarly, there's the 50 units or more, which the fee would be $60 per unit, excuse me. So $60 per unit at 163,000 would generate about 9.8 million. And then if there were to be this rental registry, there needs to be a bureau that oversees this. And that obviously would cost money, but that money that would be an administrative cost to the city would be covered by a rental registration, because in theory, it would generate $22.9 million. So that is a significant amount of money that could be generated for a city that's looking at ways to get very, very creative with revenue. So I want you to just look at this from the city perspective, which is not necessarily a cash cow, but it does produce revenue that is very, very much needed. So, Stephen, I'm going to just stop sharing my screen because I think there's a lot of desire to get into some more questions, but I'm going to hand it back over to you and obviously stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much for that, Adriann. I appreciate that. I think it was very helpful just to kind of see in black and white what we're dealing with. So, Myk, since we now have an idea of the process, the status, and kind of the substance within this ordinance, could you tell us a little bit about what the NBOA is doing to educate the public? How are we going about that?
Sure, and thanks, Steve. And of course, the most important thing we do is deploy our most powerful weapon, which is you.
Thank you.
So yeah, a couple things to our approach on talking about this when we're dealing. My role is talking with the media. It's a very blunt instrument. The stuff that Joe and Adriann do, that's talking with elected officials about the details. They really got to be smart and stuff to do that. With me, I have to do really big pictures because it's harder to make sure you get a message across when you're talking through reporters and through the media. So first big thing, most of you have heard this, the number one rule we always use, that there are more people who pay rent than people who collect rent. So when we're talking, make sure you're talking from the perspective of why is this bad for the resident? Unfortunately, the city's perspective is, you're making money, too bad if this hurts you. But it's not that it hurts us. It's because what it does makes it harder for us to be good housing providers. And that's the thing that we need to communicate as well, is that we are the communities we serve. A majority of us, according to our survey, live in the communities that we serve. We shop in those communities. We even hire in those communities. We're very much a part of it. And when it comes to affordable housing, 70% of affordable housing is provided naturally occurring, meaning it's by people who are like the NBOA members. So those 2 points need to get across, because if you want to understand housing, you have to talk to a housing provider. And that's another point that we made with the Tribune's editorial board that really made an impact on them. It landed well. So when we're talking about specifics of this proposal, one of the things I'm trying to frame it is at the very high level, not in any given detail of it. The most important issue across the board in any voter group right now is affordability. And the city's even saying this is an affordability measure. But it's a massive expansion of the things that housing providers have to do. And the bottom line is, as you all know, you don't make housing more affordable by making it more expensive to provide housing. And at the high level, if you're introducing 100 new regulations that people have to conform with, you're introducing 2 new city programs that have to be staffed, one of which is going to be enforcing issues on housing providers. And if you're going to impose a new fee on every apartment, that's not making it more affordable. That's directly the opposite. So at that very high level, those are the ways we want to frame what's going on here for people who aren't in the game and doing it the way that members of council and staff are. So far, a couple of media places we've been able to get the story out with. The Daily Line called and did a great interview. Thank you, Steve. The Sun-Times called, and our member, Jeff Weinberg, a member of the NBOA's executive board, also did a fabulous job explaining those points. And then finally, we were able to get with the Tribune's editorial board, which was a wonderful opportunity for them to really pepper us with hard questions for an hour about what this would mean, what alternatives there might be, how this would work, how this would affect the people that we serve, the people we provide housing with. Their editorial was right on point. One sentence I'll just share with you. Only a fool would make it impossible for landlords to make ends meet at a time of housing scarcity. Talk about counterproductive. It was a great meeting. Both Mike Glasser and Steve were eloquent and sharp in letting them know how hard people work to provide affordable housing, keep their prices affordable, to take care of the people that they serve, to give them clean, safe housing. And the editorial reflected that beautifully. And I'll just add, 6 hours after their editorial posted, the mayor's office reached out to us to request a meeting. So thank you for all the support you give the NBOA. It allows us to do what we do and have an impact on your behalf.
Thank you, Myk. I appreciate those comments. What are, for everyone that's watching right now, what are the priorities that housing operators, housing providers should focus on when they're talking to their clients, or if they know their alderperson? In other words, what are the key messages to highlight opposition?
Well, the most important message is one that Myk just enunciated. We are way behind other comparable cities in terms of the amount of housing being created. And a large part has to do with this very unfriendly environment that this well-intentioned legislation, not this necessarily, because this hasn't even gone into effect, but other pieces of legislation have done to discourage the creation of more housing. An overly strict ARO, for example, is one example.
That's the affordable requirements.
Affordable requirements ordinance is that when you develop something that requires a zoning change or other city assistance, you have to set aside a certain percentage of housing for people in certain income ranges. And so that's really the message that needs to go out, is it's getting increasingly hard for us to manage and create more housing. And what you're doing is you're encouraging what they say they're trying to discourage, which are out-of-town REITs and corporations buying up the housing. Corporations that aren't based here, that don't own and that don't live here, that don't use businesses here, but simply are out-of-town investors. And what that does is it makes it even more difficult to hold building owners and managers accountable. So that's kind of the message, and the message should go out right away. If you live in the city, Meet with your local alderman. Call them up. Ask for a meeting. If you own buildings in the city, and identify which wards those buildings are in, and go meet with the alderman or alderwoman who represents the area or areas where the building is located. Tell them why this is that this is just such a bad idea. It's not necessary. There are protections already in place for tenants. There are things to do, and by tying your hands, by making it basically giving renters who would pay their rent on time a right to live in a dwelling in perpetuity is not a good idea. It makes it much more difficult to evict problematic tenants, those who are disruptive to their neighbors, those who are causing that may pay their rent on time but are causing other problems. And anyone who's gone in eviction court knows how difficult it is to evict somebody, even for a objectively proven reason, lack of paying rent. When you have to evict someone because of quality of life issues, very steep hill to climb to try to do that. And so what you do is you just say, you know what, it's not working out. I'm not renewing your lease. And you give them whatever notice is required, depending on how long they've lived in your unit, anywhere from 30-day notice to 120-day notice. And then you're done. You're done with the problem. This will prevent you from doing so. So these are sort of the things you want to talk to. In addition, we are going to be organizing groups of housing providers to meet with aldermen on an individual basis. If you would like to be part of those meetings, to impress upon them the seriousness of this, please share your information in the chat, and we will reach out to you and make you a part of our advocacy committee. So those are other things. And then stay tuned. Read our emails. When this draft of the ordinance is finally introduced, we know specifically what it says, and we kind of have an idea of when it'll be coming for a vote. We're going to go in with all guns blazing.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. I did have maybe two more things I'd like to touch on before we go to the Q&A. Now that we have kind of like our call to action, what you guys can do individually. One of the questions that I have for maybe Adriann, you can give us this the answer is, what impact do you think it would have for the move-in fees that are in this ordinance, what they're trying to propose for the move-in fees? And then also there's a requirement, and of course we haven't officially seen the language, but we've heard that there's a requirement to disclose any investors that had more than 20%. What do you think the impact would be for those two?
So with the move-in fee, I think that there will be a lot of confusion initially. I think that, people who have been in the industry for a long time, maybe they're not connected to a group such as NBOA or other organizations, they just might not know. Anytime you have a significant change in law, it's very challenging to get the word out to everyone in the community, right? And there are a lot of very small owners that maybe bought a property 20 years ago and it was underwater, but maybe they've been able to hold it, for a while, and they just continue to operate. And this significant of a change will be impactful. So there's always that, but specifically with the move-in fee, I've heard, from different conversations, and this has been a long time coming. Move-in fees have been discussed for many, many years, and security deposits. So the industry has moved from collecting security deposits because of the risk. They've moved to collecting a move-in fee. In some cases, the move-in fees are very high. And, the tenant who is looking to move, you don't get that money back, right? And so I see why there's some sort of a need to make sure that costs are not, $700 and you're not getting that back. In some cases, when you see move-in fees, it makes sense why they want to regulate that. But on the other hand, when the risk of taking a security deposit is so high, there may be a shift to collecting a security deposit, but that security deposit is limited to 1 month's rent. So the question is, will this cap of the move-in fee cover the actual cost that it takes to process and to have someone move in? Now, if you're capping it at $50, we know that in some cases, screening companies that collect this fee, it might be $85. The landlord, property manager, whoever is working with a tenant just will need to disclose that. You'll have to disclose any of those costs. And the other fees that aren't necessarily well known, but in some larger buildings, you might be paying for additional services for waste removal. That's a huge cost. You're paying to hold an elevator. You're paying the administrative fees. And some of those fees are really challenging to get a 1-to-1 ratio of what the actual cost is. So it's sort of averaged out. And I would imagine that, most people on this call know the challenge of, having that direct relationship to all of the fees. So to answer the question about move-in fees, I really think that, you're really going to have to iron out what those costs are. And maybe there will be a shift if this were actually to get introduced and to pass. But, in its current form, it's just a lot of this language is just not feasible. So hopefully I answered the first part of your question, which was move-in fee and the impact. And I think people who are on this call should really try to think through, how are you currently collecting move-in fees? And based off of the state legislation, you're going to really have to start to disclose more and more information about what that fee actually is. Stephen, you asked a second part of that question, and I want to make sure I cover that. So what was the second part?
You did a great job on the first part.
Okay.
And the second part was just there's a proposal in this ordinance to disclose any owner that has more than 20%, right? So I know a lot of times people may have like silent partners or things of that sort. So what do you think the impact would be to have to disclose anyone over 20% ownership?
I might not be the best person to answer this question. And I'm just going to keep my answer short and sweet, which is, it's really meant to disclose who's involved with an LLC. So who are the people behind an LLC? If there's one person who's behind 20 LLCs, the city wants to identify who those people are. That's the true intent from the city side. But if you're talking about from a business perspective and from just an operational standpoint, I'm not sure what that looks like from that perspective. But again, I'm coming from like, why would the city want to know this?
Appreciate that. Joe or Myk, either one of you want to try to chime in on? No,
I think in terms of the difficulties with disclosing all your investors, folks on this call could tell you why that can be a challenging thing.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Thank you guys for all of your insight that was given in the last 45 minutes or so. I'd like to kind of move into the Q&A session. I see that we have been answering some questions in the chat, but I do think that there's probably a couple that we can go over. And it seems like there was a lot of questions that were repeating. So let's see here. Let's see.
You want me to jump in?
Please. Thank you.
Stephen, I'll jump in and help you kind of organize it because I've been managing it. So there were a couple of questions regarding non-renewal. So I'll just kind of throw them all in there together. But one of the questions was how much notice is now required for a non-renewal of a lease? Um, if you're non-renewing somebody, do you have to tell them why? And are there reasons that would be an exception to allow somebody to be non-renewed?
Well,
was-
my understanding is that right now you don't have to give them a reason that you're not renewing. You just, are you asking about what it is now or what the proposal
Well,
is?
yeah, I, I think both. I don't know if this is in the proposal or not. From the perspective of the
Well,
question, I
as
think
the
is
law,
there
as you know, as
proposed.
the law stands right now, there's longer notice period. There's the notice period when you have to notify someone whether their lease is going to be renewed depends on how long their tenancy has been. And I'm going to, I don't want to botch it. It's short-term tenancy of less than a year. It's a 30-day notice. 1 to 3 years, I think it's a 60-day notice. And over 3 years, I think it's 120. Correct. People who are in the business can help me recall that better than I can because they do this every day. In the as we understand as the ordinance being proposed is you gotta keep renewing the lease. And now if you decide you want to raise the rent, again, we're not looking at any language, but it sounds like if they decide they want to raise the rent, then the person could say, well, I don't want to pay more rent. Pay for my relocation.
Which is exactly the next question I was going to bring up is why can't the tenant just say no to any increase? I find it unconscionable to raise it $1, and now you're in that loop.
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard to say. I mean, without having the language in front of you, it's hard to say. But if it's any reason whatsoever for any rent increase, obviously that's ridiculous.
There were some questions.
I might add. Oh, I might just add
Go
something really quick, Jeff, if you don't mind.
Go.
So,
of course,
when you're doing the non-renewal, the way I believe it would be is if you're doing the rent increase, you would have to notify them. But the other notice is that the landlord or the operator would advise the tenant to seek legal counsel if there's any sort of non-lease renewal, right? So that would be like to ensure that they are getting the relocation assistance, right? So that's where the landlord is, pushing information to the tenant so that, and you do this all the time. You give tenants information about knowing their rights. There would be a notice requirement of, additional rights that they have under the draft language that we've seen.
So this is my question kind of tied to it, but a lease is a legal contract. It has all sorts of terms, including a beginning and an end. And are they rewriting contract law that says that a lease has a beginning but no end?
So, this is where I would say that the Department of Housing is getting a lot of pushback because of the rent control ban at the state and why so many organizations want to ensure that the rent control ban that was passed in 1997 stays in place, right? Because there is a strong likelihood of significant lawsuits against the city because with a tenant relocation assistance, what you're saying is you can't raise the rent. And if a tenant believes that raising the rent is unconscionable, they can say no and terminate the lease and require relocation assistance. Well, that is a form of rent control, and this has been upheld in court cases in the past where if you have something that limits an ability for a landlord to increase rental rates, that's a form of rent control.
Hi, this is Michelle Pennington. I'm with Medill Street Partners. I have a couple of family units in the UK, and just thought I'd share with you that as of May, the England changed rental rules. so that I am no longer permitted to put a lease end date on the lease. So to your point, Jeff, yes, I think, this is very much a possibility. This is coming. That is now a UK rule, that there is no lease end date permitted. I'll put the verbiage in the chat. Just, it's a good thing to be aware of what's going on.
There an understanding by the city that there are some bad tenants and that bad tenants cause good tenants to actually move out of buildings, and that the bad tenants cause the good tenants to move out of the buildings because they have the wherewithal. But the bad tenants, I shouldn't say the bad tenants, there are other tenants that don't have the wherewithal, so they're stuck enduring the problematic tenant that's disturbing their quiet enjoyment, that has the police at the building, that's flooding out their kitchens or bathrooms, destroying their downstairs neighbors' apartments. Is there any appreciation at the city level that these things also exist, and that's a reason for a non-renewal, and why ultimately a housing provider wants a tenant to go and needs a tenant to go?
I think that's very helpful to explain that, to let them know that there may be an instant where everybody in the building knows that someone is engaged in illegal activity, but if the person hasn't been convicted, it may not be easy to prove that in an eviction court for a reason to get the person out of the apartment. And that's a huge quality of life for everybody in the building. So that's an example of something that's bad for the residents of the building. And correct me if I'm wrong.
There were a few questions on the registry fee. One is it based on the number of units that an individual, an LLC owns, or is it based on the number of units in the building itself? And is this a one-time fee or an annual fee?
So this is a one-time fee. And as we were talking, and it
Adriann,
is.
I don't. Are you sure it's a one-time fee? I thought they were talking about it being.
It's an annual fee. I'm sorry, it's an annual fee. I am so sorry about that. So it's an annual fee. So every year this is a registration fee that you would pay annually. I'm sorry about that. The one thing that I did want to make clear is that the way I'm reading the language now, it's based off of building size, not amount of units owned. So it's if there's a building that you own, if there's two buildings and you own one building that has 2 units, you would pay the $20. If it's a building that's larger, say you own a building that has 20 units, then you'd pay the higher fee. So it's based off of the unit size, and it is per unit.
While people don't necessarily want to talk about, and this is a question that's in the chat, there are lots of non-conforming units, basement units that aren't necessarily counted, that people would like to make as legit units, but the city makes it pretty difficult to do that. When this registry goes in, are all those units going to then be exposed and shut down? So we're going to lose even more housing in the city?
You could make an argument for that. But ultimately, the city does want to get a better understanding of the current housing stock, right? And so you could say that that is an intent of the rental registry to identify illegal non-conforming uses. Some aldermen may say that's why we passed the ADU ordinance, because we want to give you, we want to get you into compliance, but it is also very challenging with some of the dynamics and costs. But ultimately, it really is to get information, right? I think that there are there may be other housing groups that think that this will be a very positive step in the right direction beyond revenue collection. It's good in identifying available housing.
This is my question still on.
Oh, sorry. I was going to. Do we have more questions?
There were a couple more. There's just maybe I'll throw this one out here, and this could be the last one. But just somebody asked just what is the latest on rent control in Springfield?
As I understand it, and I'm not a Springfield lobbyist, but we do stay in touch with the Chicagoland Apartment Association. And as I understand it, there is two rent control bills. They're both stuck in the state Senate committee. They did not come up for a vote in the state Senate, and they're not active right now in the House. So right now there is rent control is dead until the General Assembly meets again. But there's nothing that has advanced regarding rent control.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe. I want to thank everyone that was on the panel today. Thank you, Jeff, for helping out with the questions. And thank you for everyone for showing up today. I wanted to turn it back over to Mike Glasser so he can close us out.
And just one update, I did check the agenda for the Housing Committee. There is nothing pertaining to this ordinance on Wednesday's meeting, so nothing's going to happen at this Wednesday's meeting pertaining to this Protect Renters Ordinance.
Thanks, Jeff.
But folks, don't hang up yet. I have an important announcement, and I first of all want to thank Steve and the panel for just exceptional work. I am going to screen share if I can. How's that look? Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay. Listen, we have this amazing group of professionals that are working for the summer soiree, or for the summer soiree. They're working for the NBOA, representing our interests, making it possible for us to do our business. And there's real money involved, in the impact of their work impacts our bottom line and our ability to go about doing our jobs without engaging in needless bureaucratic requirements. They do not work for free. These are highly skilled professionals. And we just recently took Adriann on, knowing that we have this challenge ahead of ourselves. In order to succeed as an organization, we need to raise funds. And if you think about the impact of what our paid professionals, and there's others involved in this, the impact that they have, it's an incredibly wonderful and thoughtful and smart investment to support the NBOA through the summer soiree event, which is on August 6th. If you want to see the slide that I'm showing you, you could see that the link is nboachicago.com, soiree 2026. If you're a corporate or a larger housing provider, or even a mid-sized housing provider, these are different supporting levels that you can consider. And there's also a category called Friend at $500. Please don't think that other people are going to pick up the obligation here. I'm talking to each one of you that care greatly about what we're talking about. And it's not only this fight. We're actively involved in Evanston. We're actively working with folks on the eviction process. We're very mindful of challenges with the property tax assessment. We work with the county, and we have a list of accomplishments. And it seems we don't look for these problems. They come to us, and we are very. You can see how skillful our professionals are, and our dedicated board members like Jeff, who's on this call, like Steve, and others. Please don't hesitate to commit to supporting the NBOA right now. There's different levels shown on the screen. Again, nboachicago.com can get you to this. Consider even joining us and supporting us as a friend for $500. But it's imperative that we can raise the money to continue to do this important work. With that being said, I want to thank you all for joining us today. Thank you also for those of you who volunteered to help us out with our legislative, our lobbying efforts that are in the future. If you have yet to respond in the chat to tell us that you'd be able and willing to help us, please do so, and note which ward you have any connections or influence, where you live, where you own properties. The chat box is still open, so please let us know if you want to assist us, as we've got a major challenge. We only covered some of the problems with this ordinance, and there's more. So thank you all for being here, and I'll turn it back. I guess I could say goodbye, unless, Steve, you have any final comment.
No, I think the comment is, please stay engaged with the NBOA and with the other organizations involved with the NBOA, and make sure that your presence is felt, because I think this is something that is going to require all of our energy and all of our strength. It's something that's going to affect us as housing providers and as residents of the city of Chicago. So please stay engaged, and thank you for coming.
And by the way, I'm slowly scrolling down. You can see those friends of ours who've already committed to supporting us. And if you see these folks, thank them, do business with them, let them know that we appreciate that they get it. They understand what we're doing, and understand that by supporting the NBOA, you can support your business and housing, and support the future of the city of Chicago. With that said, I think we could say goodbye and thank you.
We're going to leave the chats on here. I'm still mining volunteers.